This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Automotive Media Conference, and now in its 31st year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. I'm Jack Nerad. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris, great to be with you again.
You as well, Jack. How are things on your side of the world?
Things are going along. You know, we're toward the end of summer now. I've got leaves falling in my front yard. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's coming here too. I can feel it. It'll come very fast.
Yeah, well, probably faster for you than for me. Let's talk about some car stories that we've got going on. And here's one that I found fascinating. Is your car spying on you? A new initiative from the U.S. Commerce Department suggests that fear isn't science fiction, it's real. And we'll have the details for you on that coming up. There is more unrest in the electric vehicle front this week as several European automakers are rejiggering their EV launch plans. We'll give you the details on that, discuss how that might affect all of us here in America. If you drive an EV, and Chris, of course, drives an EV, you know that the interaction at public chargers can get, shall we say, dramatic. And now one public charger company is taking a step to limit that drama, but I'm wondering if it could backfire. So we'll share our thoughts on that, let you know what's going on there. And speaking of EV drama, electric vehicle fires in one country have prompted its government to look into the situation as panic grows regarding the technology. And I'm not overstating that. There's some panic in this particular country about that. You have a favorite among these stories, Chris?
Oh, I don't know, Jack. They all seem relatively dramatic to me. So maybe the EV charger.
Yeah, I'm real curious because you, of course, experienced that. What your thoughts are on that. America on the Road is brought to you by drivingtoday.com, emlancy.com, the publisher of my latest book, Dance in the Dark, and of course, Mercury Insurance. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. California save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at drivingtoday.com/auto insurance. That's drivingtoday.com/auto-insurance. And of course, you need that hyphen. Well, as you longtime listeners of the show know, Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. Each week we get together to talk about cars, the car industry, how you can save some money on your car. And Chris, I know it's still summer there, but are you worried about fall setting in?
No, I always love fall, although it's a precursor of what's coming here. This winter is predicted to be warmer and wetter than usual, so hopefully I got some good vehicles to test while it's going on.
Yeah, fall there is terrific. Your test vehicle is what?
I had the 2025 Honda Pilot Black Edition. Can't wait to tell you all about it.
Yeah, can't wait to hear that. My test car this week is the 2024 Grand Wagoneer, a massive vehicle, so I'll tell you about that. And our special guest is Kevin Butt. He is the Regional Environmental Sustainability Director at Toyota. And so we'll talk to him about that. So stay with us. A lot of show. Stay with us, and we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you. And we have some, I think, really interesting news this week, some crazy stuff I wouldn't have expected I'd be reporting. But here's the question. Is your car spying on you? The United States Commerce Department is expected to propose barring Chinese software on autonomous vehicles. And they're worried for security concerns. Pretty interesting stuff here. I mean, this is on level 3 vehicles. What's your overall take on this?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely reason to be concerned about China's influence in the technology world. But I also think that just every other vehicle that is connected these days is collecting more information than most people actually understand.
Yeah, I mean, the vehicle knows where you are and is reporting that presumably back to its manufacturer. This, it sounds otherworldly or, kind of like science fiction, but the Commerce Department is very serious about that. They called a meeting. This was a White House meeting that involved also I think the State Department. Other countries were brought into this to talk about the national security risks, that's a quote, associated with these connected vehicles. A bunch of different countries got together. The Chinese, of course, are not very happy about this. Quite the contrary. And apparently, several Chinese companies have been testing in the United States the number, I love the names of these Chinese companies. Let me read off a quick list here. Beidou, Nio, WeRide, Didi, Xpeng, Inceptio, Pony, AutoX, and DeepRoot.
If I were going to create an evil empire of a company, I would name it one of those things.
Yeah, it sounds like the children of Emperor Ming, or some very negative kind of situation. So these are a real national security risk from your car. I mean, go figure.
Yeah. One more thing.
Yeah. Well, one more thing in the EV market is a lot of European car companies are starting to rethink what they were about to do in terms of introducing vehicles. Volkswagen is still charging ahead with some of its EV offerings. Of course, they postponed, maybe indefinitely, the launch of the ID.7, their electric sedan here in the United States. Maybe that makes sense. There's not a whole big sedan market here anyway. They are charging ahead, though, with the ID Buzz, which I think we're all, kind of dying to see and dying to drive. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the global situation is I'm going to say challenging for automakers. It's interesting to see which models companies like Volkswagen choose to delay for the US and those that they decide to bring. I mean, the ID Buzz, we heard about this, 2020, 2021 now?
Yeah,
so it's been
so long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's been out already here, but even though it hasn't. So
yeah. I did see some in Denmark when I was there, I think in the spring, but cool vehicle. Can't wait to see that. I'm worried, though, for my Volvo friends, our friends at Volvo and Polestar, for that matter. They're just not gaining much traction with their all-electrics. I think they're gaining more traction probably with their plug-in hybrids and hybrids. They had vowed to go all-electric by 2030. I think they're going to walk that back fairly soon now.
Yeah, and they're in a particularly difficult conversation because of their Chinese ownership, right? So
yeah.
I'm sure that is cause for some concern.
Yeah. Heaven hope them that they don't have autonomous driving systems at level 3 in there. They're banned for the United States. Jaguar Land Rover still is going to launch a bunch of EVs, but they've kind of slowed that down too.
Yeah, they went down to they're not going to sell any models, or at least only one model for at least a year. Is that right? I think I read that.
Yeah, I think that is true. Well, let's talk about the drama at EV charging stations, because there's tons of drama, and I think there's tons of drama for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons is what is termed as overstayers. People who are on the charger and then somebody else wants to charge, but their car is still plugged in. And I've heard reports about people pulling charging cords out of cars and fisticuffs and all kinds of horrible stuff. I mean, you haven't run into that personally, have you, Chris?
No, but as I've said many times, we only have one higher speed public charger here in my town. What people frequently do is park their car on the charger in the morning and then come back in the afternoon and pick it up well after it's reached, the 80 or whatever % mark. So I think, the limitations, putting limits on charging times could be helpful, but unless the penalty is strong enough to really sting, people are still just going to leave their cars sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, Electrify America says it will stop EV owners from charging to 100%. So you can't really fill up your battery with electricity the way you would fill up your gas tank with gas. And one of the reasons is when a battery is approaching about 80%, that next 20% takes a lot longer because of I guess physics, the way electricity works. And so they would like to limit people to charging their cars only to 80%. I think a lot of people probably not too happy about that idea.
Yeah, that could be a real hassle on a road trip where you do want to get as much time in between stops as possible. But I have to tell you, this is all reinforcing my joy of having a home charger that was installed last week. So very happy to have that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that's working out for you, and that's good. If you go on the road, I mean, apparently there will be some kind of monetary penalty for overstaying. You'll be charged for the wait time but I don't know that that's going to solve the problem. I think a lot of people might put up with paying that charge just to, get to 100%. as you say, if you're moving down the road and you want that, whatever it is, 300 miles of range, you don't really want to settle for 80% of that.
Yeah, I mean, people in everyday charging, just driving around town, 80% is fine. But like I said, if you want to take a trip and get every bit of juice out of your vehicle, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, so interesting. I guess part of the issue too is that Electrify America has deals with a lot of car companies who offer their owners of their electric vehicles free charging. So those people, want to fill up. They don't want to just go to 80%. They want everything that they can get.
Yeah.
As you would assume if you're paying that big premium for an electric car. Well, we talked about these electric vehicle fires, and it's in South Korea. And there was a recent fire that really kind of prompted a lot of concern. It was a fire in an underground garage that apparently started spontaneously in a Mercedes-Benz EV, and it took 8 hours to put out. It destroyed or damaged about 140 cars, this is according to a Reuters report, and forced some of the residents in the apartment building to move into shelters, forced the evacuation of the apartment building. Of course, when an apartment building is on fire, I'd kind of evacuate too. But this has prompted the transport ministry officials in Korea to start talking with the automakers and going, hey, what's happening here and what can we do about this? One of the things they want to do is disclose the battery brands, because I think some of the brands are more prone to catch fire than others. And this makes you wonder too, Chris, about cheap EVs in America with, maybe odd battery chemistry.
Yeah, the newer battery chemistries that are coming out are cheaper and, not quite as energy dense as the lithium ion batteries that are more expensive. But to your point, I mean, putting out these fires is an amazing challenge for first responders. I read a story, actually wrote a story earlier this week about a person in Tijuana, Mexico, who plugged his car directly into a power line and caught, 2 homes on fire, and they had to basically encase it in mud and just let it burn itself out because they didn't have enough water for it. So big challenge for these guys.
Yeah, it isn't. I guess the problem is happening on a fairly regular basis. Here's some statistics on it. About 1,400 fires occurred in underground parking lots in South Korea over the last 10, 12 years. About half of those were attributed to vehicles, and many of those were attributed to electrical causes. But I should caution everybody, it's not electrical vehicle causes. There's a lot of electrical fires in conventional vehicles as well, and that's probably the majority of this.
Yeah, it's always tricky to talk about EV fires because people automatically go to they're more prone to catch on fire than gas vehicles, and that's not true. But like we said, when they do catch on fire, it's a big problem.
Yeah, very big problem. Well, when we come back, we will be road testing some very cool vehicles. You were road testing a 2025 Honda Pilot, and I was road testing the brand new Grand Wagoneer, shuttling people around my homeland here, letting them see what's going on, doing a little trip curating here. So when we come back, we'll talk about both of those things. Stay with us. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Christy Jack Nerad back with you. And we're so glad you're with us. We really do appreciate you listening to America on the Road. We know you have a lot of things that you could be listening to, so we're honored the fact that you're listening to us. And it is road test time for us. And Chris, you have a new, brand spanking new 2025 model to talk about. Tell us about it.
I do. I drove it back from Boston after a New England Motor Press Association event a couple of weeks ago. It's the 2025 Honda Pilot Black Edition. Jack, the Black Edition is new for 2025. Honda sells 6 different versions of this vehicle, starting with the Sport trim. It's around $42,000. My Black Edition trim with a few options came in at just under $57,000. Have you driven the Pilot recently, Jack? And if so, what do you think about it?
I don't think I have driven it. I was there when they were kind of doing a soft launch, or actually an embargoed launch, unveiling it and showing it to people, but I'm not sure I've ever gotten behind the wheel.
Well, it's very good for families, so I think you might enjoy it. But you still get the same engine you did in 2024 with this vehicle. It's a 3.5 liter V6. It's 285 horsepower, 262 pound-feet of torque. Front-wheel drive is standard. My Black Edition came with all-wheel drive, as does the Trail Sport and a couple other variants. But you get a 10-speed automatic transmission with this vehicle. Jack, I got to tell you, this powertrain doesn't sound all that impressive on paper, and it really isn't in operation either. But what it is and what it feels like is very solid. It's very refined in most situations, though I will say the 10-speed stumbled a few times in the first few gears just because it's trying to get through the gears as quickly as possible to save fuel. But other than that, I mean, I think this is a very planted, very confidence-inspiring vehicle. It's quiet too, which I think a lot of people really appreciate, and they don't really care about having 500 horsepower under the hood with a Honda Pilot. So no real complaints with the powertrain. I do like that it makes a good, healthy V6 sound. Honda didn't take all of that away. So when you put your foot down, you get a powerful sound, even if you aren't going anywhere in a particular hurry. I didn't get to test this vehicle off-road, but I will say the Trail Sport model does have beefier tires, so you get all-terrain tires. If you wanted to do some light trail driving, that would probably be the model to get. This vehicle's got gloss black wheels and all-season tires, so it's not the best for trail driving, I should say. Inside, you get 3 rows of seating here, Jack, with up to 8 seats, depending on how you have it set up. We were able to jam a few kids into the 3rd row seat and had no trouble getting them in or out. The 2nd row folds and makes it very easy to get in there. The Black Edition comes with black leather with red accents. That seems to be the theme here, is black and red. So you get perforated leather with red dots and everything. So it's a really nice looking interior. I like the changes that Honda has made. The front seats are extremely comfortable, very wide. I always make the joke about myself being too wide, but these seats were perfect for me. And the 2nd row seats, the kids had plenty of room to move around back there too. And as I said, the 3rd row is accessible, though I probably at 6 feet tall wouldn't want to ride back there for too long on my own. If you fold the 3rd row seats down, you get 48.5 cubic feet of cargo space. That's pretty good. It's above average, not huge, but that goes down to 18.6 cubic feet with the 3rd row upright. So you do lose more than half of your available cargo space if you need to use the way back seats, as my kids call them. Honda's infotainment system, Jack, I want to get your opinion on this, but it runs well. My vehicle had an optional 9-inch touchscreen. You get a 7-inch touchscreen as standard. I think it runs pretty well on both. What do you think of the changes they've made recently and how well it works?
Well, if I remember correctly, Chris, I think they have kind of 2 separate systems. The up level has Google built in, and it's kind of a Google-based system, and the basic system, a more standard system, isn't. Maybe they have changed that, but I certainly the Google-based system is a pretty good one. I'm just kind of surprised that they had centered on the up-level models.
Yeah, they did that for the Accord too. I think the top level hybrid Accord got that system as well. A 9-inch touchscreen and Honda's 10.2-inch digital gauge cluster. You don't get the level of configurability here that you would from like a Volkswagen digital gauge cluster, but you can move things around and it's clear enough and everything's easy to see. The touchscreen is very responsive. I think the system is more intuitive to use than in previous versions. You're not hunting and pecking for a lot of different menus and things. Plus, you get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, wireless charging. You get this in-car intercom system, which is neat because you can shut down all the speakers and yell at people in the 3rd row, which is handy for having kids. Sirius XM radio, 12 speakers. So you get a load of equipment here, which you should for an almost $60,000 SUV. Finally, this vehicle comes standard with Honda sensing. So you get things like forward collision alerts, automatic emergency braking, lane keep assist, but mine added blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alerts, and a few other features. So plenty of tech in this vehicle, plenty of space. I think I would probably go for a cheaper trim level. I wouldn't really need the black accents to pay the extra money for it. But all in all, the Honda Pilot is what it advertises itself to be. It's a great family hauler. It's comfortable, and it's a relatively good value.
Yeah, I think it's probably a very good value, actually, and very cool. I'm glad you liked it. Well, I was driving a vehicle that could be the most lavish vehicle I have ever driven. Certainly right up there. I mean, and I've driven some Bentleys in my time and Rolls Royces, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about the Grand Wagoneer. I guess you could call it the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. I'm not quite sure whether they're precisely calling it Jeep or not these days. I mean, they didn't initially call it a Jeep, but it brings back the Grand Wagoneer nomenclature that Jeep had used way back in the 60s. I think it started in 63 or something like that. Jeep hasn't had a great history with three-row SUVs, but this is a massive one, and I think it's a great one. Like I say, very, very lavish, with plenty of power. But what wows people, and I had some house guests here, some friends of friends and friends of my daughter and stuff like that visiting through the past weekend, and they were just blown away by by the interior of this vehicle. It's just, so lush. Very high quality leathers, quilted, perforated, all kinds of things. Screens everywhere. It's just amazing. The second row seats are as good as the front row seats in terms of adjustability and the way they look, all of that kind of stuff. It's built on a truck chassis, basically on the Ram 1500 truck chassis. And you could say, well, why put it on a truck? But at the same time, that's one of the best riding vehicles I've ever driven anyway. So not so bad. It uses, in the configuration we had, which was the very up-level version of the Grand Wagoneer, air suspension. I think all of the Grand Wagoneers actually have air suspension. So it can be raised and lowered on its suspension, and it just rides really, really well. You do experience the fact that it is based on a truck in the fact that it's gigantic. I had the long wheelbase version of this thing, and it's kind of like parking a super tanker or something like that. But in terms of being luxury equipped, it certainly got that. It's powered by a 510 horsepower twin turbo 3-liter inline six, their Hurricane 6. And I'm kind of surprised, maybe even Stellantis is surprised that this vehicle doesn't get that much better fuel economy than the old 6.4 liter V8, the old Hemi V8. It really doesn't. It isn't that much more fuel efficient. I mean, it's a great engine. It seems very smooth and all of that kind of stuff like that. And, this thing is actually pretty quick, 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. It kind of blows you away for something. Heaven knows what this thing weighs. I imagine it's something like 5,000 or 6,000 pounds. It's up there. Your reaction, Chris?
That is a lot of acceleration for such a hefty vehicle, and the types of people that are driving this aren't really the type of people who expect that kind of performance. But I think I go back to the complexity with this vehicle. It worries me, the number of different systems and things that are in this thing, despite it being as nice as it is.
Yeah. Well, that worries me too. I guess if you're paying $120,000 for a vehicle, maybe you're not so worried about that because you have enough money to get it fixed and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that there's been any problems that we've noted.
No.
The L version has a ton of cargo space. It has 44 cubic feet behind the third row. So that's a massive amount of vehicle. I mean, in terms of picking people up at the airport, absolutely. I could see these going into chauffeur service very, very easily. 89 cubic feet with the rear seats folded, and there's just multiple screens everywhere. You can have a passenger screen if you want. You can have two rear screens, big screen up front, 12-inch center touch screen. The HVAC controls, the heating and air conditioning controls, are on a different touch screen. It has all the bells and whistles from a tech point of view, and a ton of driver assistance features too. The only thing it won't do is drive itself. And maybe my sense is a lot of people don't care that much about having level 3 or level 2 plus, I guess is what we're looking at with the Super Cruise and Blue Cruise. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, my wife is one of those people. The few Cadillacs and Fords that I've tested with either Super Cruise or Blue Cruise, she's been very upset that I decided to test it while she was in the vehicle with me. Her Volvo had a lane centering system that functioned. You had to keep your hands on the wheel, but pretty robust system that she never used. So, I think a lot of people, even if they don't necessarily consider themselves enthusiasts, do enjoy having full control of the vehicle.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe they don't trust having the vehicle having full control of itself.
That's a good point,
too.
yeah.
I mean, this, has so many bells and whistles. It's absolutely a good competitor for the Cadillac Escalade. I think there's a new Lincoln Navigator, like imminent, and we will see what that is all about. But this kind of takes luxury to the next level here. And while 100,000 plus seems like a ton of money, and it is a ton of money. I mean, I bought houses for a lot less. It still seems like, in a lot of ways, kind of a bargain from the amount of just great stuff that this thing offers.
Yeah, I mean, if you bought a comparable Mercedes GLS or BMW X7, I think you'd be paying at least that, if not much more than that, for a vehicle that probably doesn't have the same amount of gear.
Yeah, and certainly not the same amount of space.
Sure.
That's absolutely sure. Well, when we come back, we will have an interview with our friend Kevin Butt. He is the Regional Environmental Sustainability Director at Toyota North America. So we'll be talking with him about what Toyota is doing on the sustainability front. So stay with us for that. Interesting stuff from him, and we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad with you, and we're lucky enough to be in the headquarters of Toyota here in, I think this is Plano, Texas, and with a terrific guest, really interesting guy who just has come off giving a very interesting presentation, Kevin Butt. Remind me of your title exactly.
Senior Director of Environmental Sustainability here for Toyota North America.
Sustainability, a big term. Big term. Maybe you want to define that for us. I think that's something that I got from your presentation. A lot of people talk sustainability. There's not much in the way of definition after that. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And sustainability to us here at Toyota and to me is, how do we continue to make a product and reduce the amount of impact it has on our surroundings, whether it's raw materials, whether it's where we build our plants. How do we do that in a way that we can be regenerative, if you will, in how we conduct our business?
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I took away too from your presentation is unintended consequences, and I think we see that in kind of everything we do. We see that in all kinds of regulations, all kinds of personal things that we do. You do something, you think something's a good idea, but it has consequences that you're not aware of. And I think there's a ton of that in sustainability. Walk us through a little bit of that. What do you think is going on there in terms of?
I think, one of the things that, I think moving towards electrification in our vehicles is generally a good idea. I mean, I'm all for that. Where I think we've rushed a little bit in this transition by demanding that, no more ICE vehicles by date certain, and
right.
The whole state's going to do this.
Yeah.
And then,
well, I come from one of those states. I come from California, where there is the mandate that no more non-electric vehicles or low-emission vehicles be sold after 2035. I mean, that's pretty draconian, I think.
Yeah. The impact of that is this unintended consequence, where now all the automakers are making these batteries for these vehicles that require additional mining, additional unfair labor practice, additional transportation of goods across the globe to be able to put into a car that's going to be driven in California or any other state, wherever they're driving them. And the other piece is that everybody is scared of the limited mileage they get, right? The range anxiety. So we're trying to build bigger and bigger batteries with longer range. And what we're finding is
more and more materials.
More and more materials.
Yeah.
And then we're finding that people aren't driving them that far because they've got that other vehicle that they drive for longer distances.
Yeah.
So you've got all this energy that's in this big battery that maybe gets used half.
Yeah. And
so then you built these batteries, you built all this, taken all this material, and you're not using it. Those are problems that we really need to have answers to, and not create this unintended consequence.
Yeah.
And the other fact, California is another prime example. You want all these BEV vehicles, but you don't have enough power.
Mm-hmm.
You have rolling
We face brownouts,
yes.
yeah,
So
at the same,
yeah. We gotta,
and infrastructure. I mean, there's so many issues, many issues we could talk about. Let's take a little bit step back and look at this from a broader angle. One of the things you presented was, certainly Toyota is not denying that there is climate change, and tell us Toyota's position on climate change.
Yeah, we believe in climate change. We believe in climate change. We believe that we're part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, anybody who sees natural history has to believe in climate change, right?
Right.
It's always changed.
And so, therefore, we believe we got to be responsible enough to be part of the solution. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're trying to do.
And your solution is much broader based than just selling a bunch of electric cars.
Absolutely.
Right. So
it's about the whole conservation strain here. It's about water. It's about biodiversity. It's about the materials in which we use to build our cars. Where do we get those? How is that sustainable in transportation? But as I said in the presentation, water is going to be one of the biggest issues we face in my time.
Right.
And we're already facing water wars. Our population continues to grow. We have to feed them. We're draining our aquifers and growing corn and wheat, soybean. So we've got to really start to figure out, and Toyota needs to be a part of, how do we encourage broader thinking in solutions to this?
Mm-hmm. Sustainability is a lot more than just selling electric cars and calling it a day. Number one, that's tough enough to sell the volume of electric cars that governments suggest you should sell, that other manufacturers should sell, without literally forcing people to buy them. Walk us through that a little bit. Your thinking on that.
Well, again, as we go back, sustainability it goes back to the education of people as well, right? We as a country have been spoiled because we're a demand society. We don't think of the consequences of those products in which we buy. Let's break it down to a simple analogy. Let's go grocery shopping. Go to the grocery store, one of the big box stores that I won't name, and then you look at how those products are packaged. Packaged inside of package, inside of package, and then a big box around that. So now you've bought all this material for what you thought was a good price, and you're going to consume it, but you've created all this waste from it.
Yeah, it's going to go into a landfill somewhere.
Go into a landfill. If your community doesn't recycle, then you're that's another problem.
Yeah.
So to me, everything is tied, right? You bought a car, okay? Car's great, but you got to look at the links of what it took to build that car and all the fingers that went out in the directions to get raw materials to build the car. Then the energy and the materials to paint that great paint color that's on the outside of that car. Right? And then the battery that's inside that car. All of those have tremendous links out to and cause impacts. And anytime anything changes, there's an unintended consequence because nobody thinks about that.
Right. One of the things Toyota has done, certainly Toyota is the leader in hybrids, has been for several decades now. My dad had an original Prius, by the way.
Nice.
Kind of cool. But you as a brand or you as a company have pushed hybrids maybe at the expense of pure electrics. Can you talk about that philosophy a little bit?
Toyota's always been conscious of what impacts are to the environment. I don't know if you remember that for years there were some ads that went out that had the Prius that was made out of sticks and that kind of thing. What we're trying, I think Toyota's position has long been conservation in manufacturing. If you go back to the Toyota philosophy, Toyota production system, MUDA is waste. Eliminate waste everywhere you go. So I think that's inbred in how we think about how we design what we do in our final product.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in things like just-in-time manufacturing, delivery,
absolutely.
Then you're not warehousing things. You're not spending money on all that. You're not spending resources on that. You're not heating and cooling buildings because of that.
Exactly.
And so let's talk about infrastructure, because that's a key portion of sustainability that I think a lot of people just don't grasp when they think about car companies, right? But you have to grasp that in your job. And to get to carbon neutrality, which I think is your goal in 2050, that's certainly a big part of that. Walk us through that.
Sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
I probably did too. I guess the point is you're looking to get to carbon neutrality in 2050.
Yeah.
Beyond just what happens with the vehicles. A significant portion involves things non-vehicle related, production related, office related, those kind of infrastructure issues. You got a big footprint in manufacturing in North America, for example. Walk us through things that you do in those situations, in infrastructure, your infrastructure, and with suppliers to reach sustainability.
Absolutely. Again, I don't want to overuse this term, but a lot of it is education and outreach to the people that are doing these jobs every day. Right? My job is I won't call it simple, but it is I've got a direction. I'm focusing on reducing the amount of energy demand that we consume, changing from simple things like water towers, changing into different types of technology, reducing the amount of simple things like compressed air that uses a ton of energy. We change all of those kind of things inside these manufacturing operations, which then reduces the amount of energy that I have to develop green energy for. But then we have a strategy. We know we're always going to use electrons. We're not going to get away from that, right? So then we have the strategy of long term, 15, 20 years, we have a 20-year strategy of implementation of virtual power purchase agreements, on-site power generation, use of fuel cells to be able to then cover all the energy demands that we have from our offices to our manufacturing operations. That is easy to say, but we're by the end of our 7th environmental action plan, we'll be at 46%, and that's in 2026.
Got it. Let's talk about a tangible example of that, what you're doing in Long Beach and how that works. Pretty fascinating stuff. A lot of your imported vehicles are delivered through the Port of Long Beach. Long Beach in California has, I think, even more stringent regulations on what happens in the port. You're responding to that. Walk us through that.
Yeah, it was one of those things that, as we were getting ready to refurbish the Port of Long Beach, it was time. It was an old structure, and to renew our lease, the Port of Long Beach said, wait a minute, now we need to talk about sustainability. How are we going to change what you're doing to benefit this port? And we thought about that, and we came up, a gentleman by the name of Mark Yamauchi had this idea of, why don't we think about a molten carbonate fuel cell? And we all looked at him, and we kind of worked our way through that. And what this turns out to be, we're using green hydrogen from the dairy operations in California, that we make pure hydrogen from that methane, and that generates it.
So you're bringing in that methane to
yeah, it's indirect biogas.
Yeah. Okay.
Directed biogas, I guess it really is. Yeah. And so then that molten carbonate unit generates pure hydrogen as a byproduct, more than we're putting in to run it. And while convenience that can be, because now we got all these fuel cell vehicles that are sitting there that we're fueling, as well as the dunnage trucks and the milk run trucks taking parts on and off site and delivering vehicles. Wow. And then another great product is hot water, pure hot water. So we use the heat off of that as a heat exchange and the water for car wash. And then we recover that. So, it was a win-win-win situation there with those three options. And and it saves us money.
Win-win-win.
What can go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. What should a consumer out there think about this? I have to, and I think a lot of us wonder if we think about it at all. At what cost does all this happen, right? Because there are costs to that. And I think that's one of the unintended aspects of this. I think a lot of people, virtually all people, want a clean environment, want the planet to survive, want all kinds of good things to happen for humanity. They also kind of want it to happen for free, right? I mean, they don't want to pay extra for their car. They don't want to, likely, a bunch of things. Walk us through kind of from the 35,000 foot level, your philosophy on all this and what people should be thinking about as consumers.
I think my philosophy is that I truly believe that if we educated people about every option that they had, whether an environmental option versus a non-environmental option, a lot of people don't know that they have options, right? So if we educate them, I like to think that 7 to 8 people would actually choose that green option because they have that consciousness that, yeah, I can't just continue to take materials and not expect something to happen. So I think that number then might change a little bit when they figure out what the cost is of that.
Right.
So then it might not be 7 or 8, it may drop down to 5 or 6. But we're still going to get, I think, a majority of people that will decide as they see the consequences that are happening in our environment that something's going to have to be done. Mm-hmm. And so they may make those choices and make them, if the cost isn't exorbitant.
Yeah. Let me ask one more giant question. It's something I think about. We know the climate has always changed. It's continuing to change. And I guess a lot of people believe that humans are major contributors of it. Maybe the auto industry is a major contributor to it. Does it make sense to try to halt that change? Or does it make more sense economically, for lack of a better term, better aspect to look at it, to just adapt to that, to adapt to a changing environment, which we're all doing all the time? Thoughts on that?
That is an excellent question. Given a lot of thought to that. Adapting to a new climate is going to have consequences to species all around the globe. So we're changing the environment. It's not just us, right? There's an ecosystem out there that depends on each other. You break off one branch of that ecosystem, unintended consequences happen to the rest of that ecosystem. So we have to really think about whether we're really going to adapt. It's not going to be temperature and water alone. There's going to be a lot of other consequences that impact us if we take that kind of attitude of, well, just the heck with it, let's just adapt as change happens, right? People will have to move. Southwest United States, which is already, hotter than it ever has been, and they're running out of water. Colorado River, which brings water there, is drying up. All that consequence.
A lot more people are drawing off the same amount of water.
You talk about economic impact?
Yeah.
When you move the Southwest to Kentucky, where, the chances of, there's less harm right now, or move them to Canada, there's a lot of impact.
Right. Well, what would you say to, just kind of summing up, as your role and what Toyota is doing in this area?
I think we're doing, the first thing is to recognize you're part of the problem. We've recognized we're part of the problem. I think what we're doing now is beginning to turn the rudder of a big ship and moving it in a direction that has more sustainability in front of it. The cars we're offering, the portfolio that we're operating under of different types of cars, more electrification, but in a responsible way of doing that is very important. But then all the other things that we're doing to work with our suppliers to help bring them into this understanding, educating, sharing solutions are all important. And then last, we got to get out in the community. As you use the term humanity, I think we're responsible for helping humanity be more humane. And so we've got to go out and help fix those things.
Yeah. Well, Kevin Butt, thanks so much for talking with us. I do appreciate it. Really thoughtful stuff today, and I appreciate what you said.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thanks. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. And that was our interview with Kevin Budd of Toyota. Our thanks to him for joining us. A lot of food for thought there. And Chris, what are your thoughts about sustainable transportation, what Toyota's doing on that score?
I think it's great because, as you know, we've talked about on the show many times, building, electrified vehicles and carbon-free vehicles isn't necessarily a carbon-free process and has quite a few side effects and global impacts on its own. So Toyota focusing on conserving water, reducing waste and packaging, and all of that all helps, the process here, even if, the actual manufacturing process itself still needs some work.
Yeah. I mean, it's not enough to have zero emission vehicles, and that doesn't necessarily get you to net zero. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Exactly.
Where that goes. That essentially wraps up our show for this week. Before we go, I'd like to mention my newest book, Dance in the Dark. It's a crime thriller inspired by true crime. And it's available on Amazon in both ebook and paperback form. So look for that if you would. If you like our show, and we're so glad you have listened to the show this far, please pass it on. Listen to it on this radio station each week. Let your friends know where you listen to America on the Road. And of course, you can give them a podcast version, can't you, Chris?
Yes, a quick Google search for America on the Road podcast will bring us to you on all the major platforms, Apple, Spotify, and the rest. Like us, download us, leave us a review. All those things help us out, and you can take us with you wherever you go.
Absolutely true. Now we are also doing video versions of America on the Road that are available on YouTube and Rumble. Not only the full show, but sometimes I think we're posting individual road tests and individual interviews. So look for that on YouTube. Look, again, I think search America on the Road. Have you done that, Chris? I
have. It's very easy to find us.
Yeah. So track us down. You can see what we look like, and we hope we don't scare you off for the next show. Our thanks to the Sports Byline Network stations for carrying America on the Road. We do appreciate that. And most of all, thanks to you for listening to America on the Road. Again, we know you have a lot of choices of what to listen to, so the fact that you listen to us means a lot to us. We appreciate it. And please join us again next time for another edition of America on the Road.